Ghostface is back, and this time, just like Jason before him, he's taking Manhattan. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on Scream 6. My take isn't the right take, it's just my take, and I would love to hear yours. Also, later this month, I'm going to be doing a couple of different fan events. I'm going to be at Fan Expo Cleveland with Austin Burke as well as John Flickinger, and then at the end of the month, I'm going to be at MegaCon in Orlando with 5 other full-time YouTubers. I'll have more information on that very soon. Details are down below in the description. And let's get started talking about the good. And I've said it many times before, but Scream is my favorite horror movie of all time, and the Scream franchise is one of my favorite horror franchises of all time. And the reason for that is that it's one of the most consistent horror franchises. If your worst movie is Scream 3, you're doing really good as a horror franchise, and I'm happy to say that that reputation remains intact. This is another solid entry in the franchise that finds new ways to deliver the experience that you want from a Scream film, while at the same time doing new and different things that keep it fresh while being consistent, not violating the experience that you expect, not unnecessarily subverting expectations, but delivering another solid Scream film. So as a Scream movie, you want to have brutal, interesting kills, you want to have a little bit of humor and meta commentary, and you want to keep the audience guessing as to who the killer is. And I think on all 3 fronts, it delivered it. This is probably the most brutal and violent of the Scream films. Just felt like a lot more of the kills were like done up close, and you're just seeing the knife go into faces, necks, throats, chests, things like that. A lot more time is spent kind of lingering on the knife, wiggling around, or whatever way people are killed. Just felt like those shots were longer, and you're seeing it more up close what's kind of happening, rather than kind of, a person gets stabbed and then they kind of drool some blood or something like that. This one gets pretty gnarly in the way that it just really shows what Ghostface is doing with the knife. And then on the comedy side to it, there's just like a nice little steady stream of little lines in there that are amusing, not over the top jokes, but just the right amount for a Scream film that keeps you entertained and laughing. On the meta commentary side, it's maybe a little bit, it's not as strong as I say it was in some of the previous films. It didn't quite have as clear of what it's trying to say about genres as a whole, and so just kind of make some general statements about franchises and what they're doing these days. Of course, you get the monologue about the rules and everything like that. That's a ton of fun. You got all the things you're supposed to have, but I wouldn't say that it's quite as sharp. But I think the movie as a whole worked even without needing to have kind of that clear theme pulling it together. And another thing that I'm really enjoying about this new legacy era or reboot quill, whatever you want to call the current Scream era, is they're really letting Sam take the lead in making it her franchise. And it still, of course, has ties to the past, but it moves forward with this movie. I heard someone say in the past that it felt like every Scream movie up until this one felt like a sequel to the original film. Everything always went back to the original film in some way. And with this one, it actually feels like we're really moving forward with a new lead character, a new direction that they want to take things. And thought that was a good direction to take it. While if you've seen the trailers, it also has, in a lot of ways, the most references to all of the previous films, and ties all of them in a little bit more. So in certain movies that have never really been referenced after they happened, this one actually references them, but without it feeling like it's all just tied back to Sidney. It's about Ghostface in this other larger sense, and I like the way that it did that. Speaking of kind of these characters, I like the idea of having our new protagonist be a little bit nutty and crazy. That she legitimately has killer in her blood. And they talked extensively about her dad being Billy Loomis in the previous film, but you also kind of forget the killer in the second film is Billy's mom, in which case she has multiple killers in her bloodline. And so this movie kind of really plays into the fact that she definitely is, you know, a little bit rough around the edges. And I thought that that was a solid, like, don't ignore that. Don't just move past that. Like, right, she's not entirely stable. Another thing that it does well is that it plays into how the internet reacts to big news stories. And so if the events of the previous film happened, how would the internet treat the people that survived the last movie? What would they respond to? What would the internet do? How would they treat them in public? And it kind of plays into that a little bit, into the plot. And maybe that's somewhat where kind of the meta stuff plays into it, the commentary on society. It is a little bit more kind of about the internet era, perhaps, is where I maybe thought it was a little bit more interesting, worked a little bit better. But it has that. If Scream 5 happened, how would the people, even on the other side of the country, respond to them in light of what the internet always happens to do with every story that breaks? Other thing you got to talk about with these movies is the Scooby-Doo aspect. And I would say it kept me guessing all the way from the intro cold open. Does some stuff that I was not expecting that makes you go, oh, that was clever. That was interesting. You found something new to do with your cold open and keep me off my feet from the very beginning of the film. And I think the whole movie does a good job of setting up all the red herrings, coming up with all the ways to make it clear that certain people couldn't be the suspect, but then once again giving evidence that they are, and just all the way kind of pointing you in a whole bunch of different directions until you get to the final reveals of the film. And so I thought I was piecing things together because they kept teasing a bunch of different directions. I was like, okay, crossing these people off my list. And then still by the end of it, I was like, okay, yeah, all right. I didn't see that particular direction going with all of this. And of course, you got to talk about the return of Kirby. And I thought they did this really nicely. You have a character who was in high school in the previous film that she was in 12 years ago, in which case she's a grown-up. And she's been a grunt for a long time now and has a career, but it kind of even acknowledges the way that adults that are like over 50 perceive of people who are still 30. And it's tough to like get out of your mind that people grow up and become adults. And so it just kind of even has some of that nice flavor kind of woven into it. Kirby is still Kirby while also being someone with a skill set of an adult, a lot of experience that everything that's kind of gone on with her. She has a complicated background that makes for a lot of, trauma in what she's doing in this film in general and her objectives with everything kind of taking place. And so there's just a number of things about it that, kind of keep you on your feet with not expecting exactly how they're going to use her in the story. So I like, as someone that, like most people, enjoyed her in number 4, love the fact that she's coming back, and I really dug the way that they used her in this film. And the final thing to talk about here is I would say that the movie's better because Sydney's not in it. And of course, she's the star of the franchise, one of the most iconic final girls of all time. But in particular, with a franchise like this, that it takes this idea of Ghostface and just expands it so much bigger than just personal vendettas. It makes sense that she wouldn't need to be in every story. And at a certain point in time, you're just forcing her into the movie. And having seen this film, coming up with an excuse as to why Sydney would like show up at some point in time, like why she would travel to New York, it would just feel contrived. It would just feel hollow, considering all the way since like the third movie she was trying to hide off in the woods and stuff like that, and all of a sudden she's always finds an excuse to end up where the action is taking place. And so I think this movie's better because it doesn't try to shoehorn her in her. She's referenced, they talk about her, she certainly has a presence in the film, but there's just not a good reason for her to actually be in the movie. So for me, I got everything I wanted out of a Scream franchise. I think they are moving forward in a solid fashion, great kills, some solid humor, and finding a way to take a franchise that's now 25 years old and still keeping it fresh. There are a couple issues here, so let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film, and I'll actually say the New York setting. And to be totally clear, I really love the fact that they took it to New York City, and as you can see in the trailers, they find some of those unique aspects to urban New York City life, where you got subways, alleys, kind of these convenience stores in the middle of busy intersections, high-rise apartments where how do you escape if someone runs into the apartment with you? Like, it has a number of those settings that are very unique to New York City, and I loved all of that. And it made for new scenarios that pushed Ghostface to having to be more aggressive, more brazen, doing things like using shotguns. All of that stuff, loved those sides to it. But watching the movie as a whole, it felt like the New York aspects were very much tied to little moments in the film rather than feeling like you're in a new place. And what I mean by that is that essentially it's another college story, the same way that Scream 2 was on a college setting. That's actually kind of what this is doing as well, and they reference that in the movie. And so it doesn't actually feel as much like you're in New York City as it does like you're on a college campus, and then they just have a couple of these little episodes in there where like they run into a convenience store. They ride on a subway to get somewhere. It plays kind of like that rather than really feeling like New York City is a character. So I put it in the mixed side because I feel like there was more they could have done with it to capture the setting of where they're actually at. And I would imagine some of that's even kind of a budget thing. Some of it is, if you're trying to remain plausible, to not have your characters not get caught, you can't be running through Times Square with someone chasing them with a knife like that. Wouldn't make any sense. And so I think probably some of that is why I felt the way that I did, but I wish that it really had that flavor of New York City even more. One more thing to mention, there is a post-credit scene, and it's very short. It's not important on a plot level. It is amusing, and it fits with the franchise and what the franchise would do in this regard, but it's not like this pivotal thing. Like if you really got to run to the bathroom, you can run to the bathroom. It's not necessary that you stay for it. It's just the sort of thing that'll put a smile on your face, but it is very, very short. From there, let's move on to the bad. And the big thing here is I just felt there were more things in this movie that really strained credibility. Whether people being seriously injured, stabbed a bazillion times, and still being able to run, crawl, climb, fight. Certain people that it clearly is trying to indicate that this person has been mauled, but maybe they haven't actually died. There's just a lot of that takes place. Likewise, when you're in a place as congested as New York City, and there's just a lot of Ghostface going into crowded spaces, doing things, and being able to sneak off. And it strains more credibility when you're in an environment that's so populated. And they'll have police show up to things really quickly, but somehow there's never any trace. Ghostface can always run off. There's a few more of those things like, really? How did Ghostface get away? Really? How did they survive that? A lot of that in this movie. You have to like suspend a lot more disbelief on what people are able to survive, as well as how Ghostface can sneak around and do all of the things that Ghostface does. Another thing, there's definitely some hammy performances in here that go a bit too over the top. And you've always had the psychos. Once things get revealed, you get these kind of psycho monologues about what their motivation is for doing all of this. Felt this one went even a little bit further. And there is at least one line of dialogue in this movie that I can't imagine it was meant as a joke, but a character says to a group of people, wow, you guys have been through an awful lot. And it was supposed to be said as this like heartfelt, oh man, you guys have really suffered. And the way that it's delivered, the way that it's cut in, my audience, and it was only critics only audience, my audience like burst into laughter at this line of dialogue. And maybe it was designed that way, but it felt like the performance was just off and a little bit clunky, so it just felt so forced and phony in that moment that literally the audience was laughing at a serious moment in the film. So, you know, couple issues here and there. Have to be able to suspend some disbelief, but if you can do that, it's a solid Scream film. I talked to a couple people after the movie was done. Here's what they had to say. Titus, what did you think about it?
I loved it, thought it was awesome. It had a lot of moments that gave me chills and had a lot of brutal kills if you're into that kind of stuff.
So what did you think about the film?
Look, I will say this. If you guys enjoyed the last Scream movie, I think you guys will enjoy this one even better. I loved it. I gotta say I loved it. But you guys can check out my full review on Cobra Star Green on YouTube.
All three of us thoroughly enjoyed the film. We think you'll love it too. The second guy in there, Julian, you can check out his full review right up here. The first guy in there is kind of a fun story. He's actually one of my former students from where I worked in Church World. And a couple months back, I was doing a live stream on my main channel, and he sent in a super chat asking about the movie. And live on the stream, I literally invited him to the press screening. So keep that in mind. Sometimes sending in a super chat during a live stream can lead to me taking you to the movies. Let me know what you thought about the film down below in the comment section. Also, come back this weekend. I'll be re-ranking all of the Scream films, and I got a couple of other Scream rankings in mind for next weekend. As I said at the beginning, Scream is one of my favorite horror franchises, and its reputation remains intact. They're continuing to find new ways to move the story forward, give us interesting new characters, use the legacy characters in ways that feels fitting and satisfying. They keep putting Ghostface in new settings, so they're still delivering everything that I want from this franchise 25 plus years later. I think you're gonna dig it too. Overall, it's a B+ on the entertainment scale, 8 out of 10, and Scream fans must see it on the big screen. Let me know what you thought down below in the comments section. You can check out my other Scream content right over there, and I'm gonna be putting a lot of more stuff in that playlist over the next few days. And check out Julian's review right down there. Thank you so much for watching. Keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.